So I'm just going to come right off the top of this thing, and I'm going to tell you, I'm glad you guys are doing good. I'm not doing great today. I'm not doing great. I've been in kind of a weird emotional place lately. Been real heavy, real burdened. My exact words to Claudia and Brock and Stacy at the office on this past Wednesday when we had staff meeting was, I feel stressed and depressed. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever say that, but I thought it was pretty good. And so you could steal that if you want to. Might be the name of my autobiography or something. But before we get going, I want to publicly thank them because they've had to deal with me all week in the weird place that I've been in. I also want to thank Kinsey because I've probably not been the most fun person to be around. I'm telling you that right off the top because I'm not trying to drum up sympathy or anything. I don't want you to worry about me. I'm okay. Like I haven't fallen into any like self-destructive patterns of behavior or anything like that. I just have felt heavy, and I want you to know that because that's kind of where this message is coming from today. I've felt heavy. It's for a lot of different reasons. There are a lot of things going on. The world is kind of a scary place. My family continues to be in a pretty hard place. We've got unresolved conflict and a lot of uncertainty going on. We're actually coming off of a very significant death in our family this week. Kinsey's aunt, Patsy, who was just kind of a pillar of our family, passed away on Thursday. We're going to be at her funeral tonight. One of my favorite things about Patsy was I loved leading worship when she was sitting in the seats in church. She would always sit, usually on the right-hand side, front row-ish. And when she really was moved by the music, she had this distinct way that she would just nod her head with the beat of the song, and I loved that. And I was thinking about Patsy the other day. I was taking my boys to get ice cream, and I was just thinking about that and how much I'm going to miss that. And so I subconsciously in the car as I'm driving, I just started bobbing my head like that, and I didn't realize I was doing it. And Cole's in the back, and he's like, "Daddy, why are you doing that with your head?" And I was like, I'm just thinking about Patsy, buddy, and I will miss that. So it's been a heavy season for us. Again, I'm okay. I appreciate your prayers, but you don't need to worry. But a lot of this message is coming out of that heaviness. This message today is going to be a little different. Most of the time when I preach, I don't preach all that much, so it's not like I'm an expert or anything, or that there's a Cody Zimmerman brand of preaching that you're coming expecting or anything like that. But most of the time, when I bring a sermon, it usually comes out of like I'm reading the text, and there's something that kind of there's something that jumps out, catches my eye, and it sparks a question, and I usually just, I want to dig at that question. Today, it's not really that. It's more of just kind of exploring what it feels like to feel this way, and what the text has to say about God's disposition towards us in that. So it's probably a little self-indulgent, and I appreciate you giving me the time, but I think that there's something in that for us today, and I know that there are a lot of you that are in a similar place. I've talked to a lot of you over this past week even. A lot of us are grappling with uncertainty. We've crossed some kind of threshold that we cannot uncross. Something has changed in your life. There's been something that's happened. You've crossed a line that you can't go back over, and things won't be the same going forward. And you're grappling with the uncertainty of that. Some of us are grappling with the heaviness and the uncertainty that comes from some sort of life change. Maybe you've had a job change. Maybe you've lost the ability to do something that you've always done, and you're like, what do I do from here on out? Maybe some of us are grappling with the aftermath of the breakdown of a relationship. There's a person that you thought would always be there, and they're not there anymore. Or for some reason now you find yourself at odds with that person, or that person is at odds with you, and you never saw yourself here, and you're like, how do we go forward? I know several people in here who are walking in the aftermath of the breakdown of a marriage, whether it's your own or your parents or somebody close to you, and you're reconciling, like, how do we move forward? whatever it is. I could go on, but the bottom line, there are many of us in this room, we've crossed some kind of threshold that we cannot uncross, and we're left grappling with the fact that, okay, things will be different now. What do we do? How do we go forward? We're sitting there and we're confronted with questions we don't really want to face. And that kind of uncertainty has a heaviness to it. And if you feel it, I think you know what I'm talking about. And so that's kind of where I'm living with this sermon. So I hope it sounds fun to you. So here we go. Let's get into the text, John 21. But that being said, the text that we're in is just an absolutely stunning story. And so I'm excited to open that up with you today. So John 21, starting in verse 1, and away we go. Here's what it says. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we will go with you. And then they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? And they answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And so they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in by boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. And when they got on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. And now this was the 3rd time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. This story's the best. It's a great story. I'm sure you have heard this story preached, taught, told a bunch of times, and the reason for that is because it's just good. This story is made for the big screen. I can't wait to see what The Chosen does with it. They haven't made it to this part of the story yet, but I'm looking forward to it. It has everything you want in like the resolution to a big screen story. I mean, it's picturesque. The disciples are out on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. They're working. And a mysterious figure appears on the shoreline, just barely visible through the morning fog. You have the parallelism in the story. You have the fact that their journey began with a miraculous catch of fish. That's when they first decided, okay, we're following this guy, and he brings it full circle, and that's how he resolves all of the tension that's in the book of John. You have the love and excitement that Peter shows, the hurling himself into the sea. You can almost hear the cinematic music swelling as he does that. It's got it all. You also have the redemption and the reconciliation. You know, the charcoal fish grilled breakfast on the beach. Jesus waiting there, setting all things right. It's just a great ending. It's just so sweet. And one of my favorite things about this story is how playful Jesus is in it. The question he asks it's just perfect. It makes me smile. You guys know we are in this series. We're talking about the questions of Jesus. Our question for today is in this passage. It's, children, do you have any fish? You can almost see the little crooked smirk on Jesus' face when he asks it. Have you caught anything? You guys have any fish? He's without a doubt being playful here, right? He's like, and I love that because it's almost, he looks like a father about to spring a surprise on his kids. Like there's this joy about him when he asks this question. So many people think Jesus is so serious all the time. You know, they think that he rolls up on the beach right here and he's like, "It is I, Jesus, wherefore art thou fish?" And that's not how he is. He's light, he's funny. Jesus is funny. Jesus laughed. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about that being in the realm of possibility? That Jesus laughed. Jesus is one with the Father, which means that God laughs. God is funny. It's possible for you to be in a very heavy place and God to meet you with levity. And God can meet you with a joke, with something that makes you smile. That's a possibility. That's a thing that can happen in your spiritual walk. Have you thought about that? That is something that can happen in your interactions with God. He does that with me. God has a playful side. Have you ever thought about that? One reason that I think I decided to preach this text today, and I did have a very hard time figuring out where to drill down, what to preach on today, is I think I needed a little bit of the playful side of Jesus in my life. I think I needed a little bit of that. The side of Jesus that can sit with me in my brokenness and smile and crack a joke. I needed a little bit of that. I've been in rooms with several people who have recently, I've been in the room right after somebody has passed away several times, usually with their family gathered around them. And one thing that is pretty common in those situations, not all the time, but most of the time, the family that's left, you know, you have the person laying in the hospital bed and the family's gathered around, and usually the family wants to laugh. People want to laugh about how it took this to get the whole family together. They want to laugh about how stubborn that person was, that they wouldn't accept help, and they want to laugh. People want to laugh and cry at the same time. Just ask my wife. It's sometimes when people are in grief, they want to laugh. And this story in John 21, this is filled with both tears and laughter. Tears of joy, tears of heaviness, jubilant laughter from death being overcome, and laughter from loved ones being reunited again. It's got all of that. Another reason this story is so sweet is because it draws on the full history Jesus has with his disciples. I mentioned it earlier, but he brings it full circle. They all, Peter, James, John, and Andrew all decided to follow Jesus after he did this miracle years ago, and that's how he appears to them after he's resurrected. It's just this beautiful full circle moment. How Jesus reconciles Peter after it, sharing a meal together. It's just beautiful. The first miraculous catch of fish is in Luke 5. You can look that up and read it later this week if you want to. But you'll remember in that story, he tells them to cast their net on the other side of the boat. They catch all the fish, and in that story, Peter, his response is he falls on his knees and he says, "Get away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." That's the first catch, and then the second one goes like this with Peter diving out of the boat. It's just awesome. And so here in John 21, he brings them back to that moment that began their walk. And this sermon today, a lot of it's built on stuff that I can't prove, but I really wanted to get in the disciples' heads about like why did they go fishing? What was Peter thinking when he jumped out of the boat? Like I wanted to explore that, and the Bible doesn't explicitly say any of these things. It doesn't say what Peter was thinking. It doesn't give anybody's motivation for anything. But I'm trying to explore that because I want to understand what is going on with these men. You can't know any of these things for sure, but I do. I think there's some clues that we can get into. One thing that I learned about this passage that I'd never seen before, and it's glaringly obvious now that I read it, but I've never noticed before that this is not the first time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was resurrected. It says right there in verse 1 of John 21, after this, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples. At the end of John 21, it says, or at the end of that story, it says this was the third time he had appeared to them. For some reason, I had always thought that this was how he announced. Like this was, I don't know why I thought that. Maybe you're the same way, but I'd always thought, like the image of Peter jumping out of the boat the way he did, I always thought this was the first time. And it's not. Maybe you knew that already. But the timeline that John gives us is in John 20, Peter actually is one of the first to go to the tomb, and he sees the tomb empty, but he doesn't see Jesus there. And so Peter has that experience, and then Jesus appears to them in Jerusalem 2 times in John 20. And then after that, and it doesn't tell us for certain that Peter was at those appearances, and so maybe this was the first time Peter had seen him, but at the bottom line, the disciples knew by the time we get to this story in John 21, by the time they're on that fishing boat, they know that the tomb is empty and he's been raised. They know that he's back. One interesting thing is that John 21 happens in Galilee. They're on the Sea of Galilee. It's another name for the Sea of Tiberias. But the other 2 appearances of Jesus happen in Jerusalem, which is about 80 miles walk from Galilee. Now, based on the fact that, as I mentioned to you guys last time I preached, that I got suckered into going on that hiking trip, I know that a decent pace for walking over a long distance is, you usually cover like around 20-ish miles a day. So it would have been like several days of walking from Jerusalem to Galilee. And one thing that I didn't realize until this week is Jesus actually tells them to go back to Galilee. Mark 16, verse 6 through 8. This is one of his first appearances to them after being raised. It says, "And he said to them, 'Don't be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified.'" This is the angel who's talking. "See the place where they laid him, but go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So, Jesus appeared to them in Jerusalem, and then he tells them to go walk 70 to 80 miles over several days back to Galilee, and that they would meet him there. And so that's what gets us to John 21, when they're fishing on the boat in the Sea of Galilee. Now, the only reason I bring all those details up is this. You have no doubt heard it taught before that when Peter says, "I'm going fishing" in the story, he's returning back to his original way of life. He's returning back to being a full-time fisherman, which is what he did for a living before he followed Jesus. But based on the fact, and I know I'm on thin ice here, but based on the fact that Jesus appeared not 1, not 2, but 3 times to them, maybe not specifically to Peter, but at least all the other guys on that boat had been appeared to by the resurrected Jesus. I don't think that they were going back to their original way of life. Also, based on the fact that the angel and Jesus told them to go back to Galilee. There's actually debate on this, which is interesting. There are scholars who debate, like, why did they decide to go back fishing? Like, people use their time to debate these things, which is kind of wild. Like, that's a thing that people choose to do. But there's a debate on it about, like, there's some scholars who think that them going back fishing, they're full on recanting their faith. They're going back to being fishermen. They're not following Jesus anymore. Other scholars think there's really no significance to it at all. They just were hungry. They needed some fish, and so they went fishing. I would say that the answer probably is somewhere in the middle. Like maybe there's some significance to them going back to what they did before knowing Jesus. Maybe it's not. Maybe they just wanted something to eat. I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. But I do think it's significant because it's a detail that John includes. I'm going to get a drink of water. Now, when I was talking earlier about how I'm not doing great, I said that I haven't taken up any self-destructive patterns of behavior or anything. I do want to add one caveat to that. There is one thing I have been doing. I've been playing video games again. And it's not really good for me. I can kind of get addicted to those really bad. My brother Casey is a big gamer. He just bought the Nintendo Switch 2, and so he was so nice to give Cole, my son, his Nintendo Switch 1, which means he gave it to me. And so we've had this thing, and I bought Mario Kart for us to have like family time, like we're playing. Ronnie's nodding at me, I like that. So it's been a blast. Me, Kinsey, and Cole, we're playing Mario Kart. I'm absolutely dominating my family in Mario Kart. But so it started off as a real wholesome thing, but then I found out that my brother had a like retro games pack installed on this Switch. And so it had a lot of like Nintendo 64 games that I grew up playing on it. And so it gradually has become like me sneaking downstairs after the kids are in bed and playing this thing by myself in the dark. And Kinsey's like, come to bed. And I'm playing Super Mario 64. And it's not great. And so maybe that's a self-destructive pattern of behavior. And it's all nostalgia, okay? It's all, I'm getting lost in this thing, not because I'm really invested like I really want Super Mario to rescue Princess Peach or anything like that. It's just that playing it takes me back to a simpler time. It takes me back to a time when things were not as scary or complicated, when I didn't have to worry about things like bills and my kids' medical histories and insurance deductibles and things like that. What it is that I've crossed a threshold in my life. I'm an adult now. I'm not a kid anymore, and I've been charged with leading my family. I've been called to take up my cross and die to myself. As a pastor, I've been called to lead and shepherd and guide, and I feel lost so often. And in times when I feel the weight of uncertainty, there is a big part of me that longs for the simplicity that I once felt. And I want to get lost in that world because it feels like an escape from the one that I'm in. Now, I know this is far-reaching, okay? Just go with me. I can't say this for certain, but I wonder if Peter and the other disciples went fishing for a similar reason. I wonder if it was a similar reason. I'm not saying it's the same reason, because going fishing is very different than playing Mario 64 in the dark. But I wonder if it's a similar reason. I wonder if they were longing for the simplicity that they once knew. Think about all they had been through leading up to this. Good Lord, the trauma. Watching their friend, their rabbi, their teacher being betrayed, tortured, murdered. They knew nothing was going to be the same from here on out. They had crossed a threshold that they could not uncross. Maybe they felt kind of lost. Maybe they felt for the first time in 3 years they didn't have a teacher waking up with them saying, hey, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, this is where your next meal is going to come from. Maybe they went fishing because it was something that they didn't have to think about. It was something that they knew that they were good at. They could turn their racing minds off, and it was a way to provide for their group. It was a way to get food, while also silencing their fears and the uncertainty that they were grappling with. More than that, maybe they went fishing for like a spiritual reset. Maybe they wanted to get back to their roots with Jesus. After all, that's where they met him. The first miraculous catch. They met Jesus in a fishing boat. It makes sense that they would go back to a fishing boat to meet him again. Maybe they longed for a spiritual reset after all they'd been through, to be reminded of the faith that they once had at first and how simply they walked, the childlike faith that they've had. See, I've been playing Super Mario because I wanted an escape, but maybe they went fishing for a deeper reason than wanting an escape. Maybe rather than an escape, they were looking for an encounter. Sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between the two. I don't know for sure. Again, I could be making all of this up, but I do know that the picture is a little bit more complex than we often think it is. I don't think that they're just saying we're going back to being full-time fishermen. I think there is something else going on. And I would submit to you the theory that maybe we look negatively on the disciples going back to fish because there are several stories in the Bible that look kind of negatively on looking back. You think about Lot's wife in Genesis being turned into a pillar of salt. You think about the Israelites saying, we want to go back to Egypt. Not great. Even Jesus himself once said to a guy who said, teacher, I will follow you. Jesus says, nobody who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. There are several stories that don't look favorably on looking back. But there's a big difference in looking back longingly at the past because you want to return there and remembering what God has done in the past. There's a big difference between those two things. There's a big difference between return and remembrance. Remembering how kind God's been to you. Remembering how faithful he's been. Remembering what he's brought you through. Remembering how much he has pursued you. Remembering how much he's provided for you. Remembering his mercy. Remembering his justice. Remembering all that he's taught you through the hard roads that you've had to walk. Remembrance. Not return, but remembrance. Maybe that's what got him in the boat. Remembering your first love and how childlike your faith was. See, I think that Peter's motivation for getting back in that boat and going fishing was not that he was done following Jesus, but because he was preparing himself for a lifetime of following Jesus in the future. I think when he saw Jesus arrested, betrayed, and murdered, something in him changed. Something in him snapped. The world got a lot bigger and a lot scarier because he didn't think he was following a conquering king in a worldly sense anymore. He knew that to follow his teacher meant to live the kind of life that he lived, and so it might lead him down the same kind of road. More than that, I think when Peter denied even knowing Jesus 3 times, I think he crossed a threshold that he would not be able to uncross. He came face to face with his own humanity, his own frailty, his own fragility. I think Peter got on that boat not because he wanted to return, but because he wanted to remember. I believe he got on that boat not because he wanted to escape, but because he needed a fresh encounter. And so my question to me, to you, church, is when life gets uncertain, why are you getting on the boat? When you return to your roots, when you go back to what God has called you, where your starting point was, what are you expecting to find there? I was sitting with my counselor last week and I was talking a lot of my feelings out. And there was this book sitting on his coffee table in front of me. And I think the book was The Wild Edge of Sorrow, which is a book about grieving. And my counselor has just lost his son just a few months ago. And so it makes sense that he would have that book sitting there. And as I was voicing to him the heaviness that I was feeling, he said to me, Cody, I just read in that book yesterday that one of the many types of grief that we have to go through is grief over the loss of things as they ought to have been. Mourning the loss of things as they ought to have been. For me, that looks a lot like mourning that I should be able to rely on this person, but I can't. I should be able to ask this person questions, but I can't. This person should have been at this thing, but they aren't. And he said to me, as someone well acquainted with grief himself, that sometimes you have to mourn the loss of things how you thought they would go before you can move forward. John Piper said it this way. Brock sent me this quote on Instagram. He knew I was talking about this. Piper says, occasionally, weep deeply over the life that you hoped would be. Grieve the losses. Then wash your face, trust God, and embrace the life that you have. There are lots of us in this room who have seen things and gone through things that have forever changed us. We aren't the person we were. We're walking in the aftermath of death and loss and brokenness and heartache. And I think that may be partially what's going on with Peter on the boat. Yes, the tomb was empty, and there's indescribable rejoicing there. But at the same time, the disciples knew they were about to be sent out as sheep in the midst of wolves. They knew that to live the kind of life that their rabbi modeled for them, they would probably be led down a similar road of suffering. And they were mourning the loss of what they thought would happen. They thought that they were following the guy that was going to overthrow Rome. And now they're coming to grips with, no, this is what we're doing now. So they got back on the boat to remember simpler times, to remember what it was like when Jesus said, follow me. And they said, we'll leave everything and follow you. That's why they got on the boat, I think. But the question is, for us, when we feel heavy, when we are struggling, when we feel burdened, when we want to escape to simpler times, when we get back on the boat, are we looking to return to those times, or are we looking to remember? Are we looking to learn? Are we looking for an escape or for an encounter? The motive makes all the difference, I think, because at the end of the day, you can't go back. You're not the same person you were back then, as much as you wish you were. Peter wasn't. He had changed. Peter was a fundamentally different person in John 21 than he was in Luke 5. In the first one, he was a fisherman. In the second one, he was a fisher of men. It wasn't all that long ago that Peter had walked on the very waves that boat was sailing through. You can't go back to being a boat person after you're a walking on the waves person. He wasn't built for boats anymore. He wasn't the same person. And you see how he responds in both stories? This is my favorite part. He's not the same. The first story, they catch the fish. Peter falls to his knees and he says, "Get away from me, Jesus, I'm a sinful man." And in John 21, even though he has never seen more clearly how sinful of a man he was, he had literally just denied Jesus 3 times, disowned him. Instead of saying, "Jesus, get away from me," he dove in the water and swam towards him. That's a different man. He knows how to approach Jesus now. He didn't know then. And maybe that's the takeaway for us in all of this. And I know I've been rambling. But if you're weighed down by uncertainty, if you find yourself burdened, if you don't know how you're going to live from now going forward in the aftermath of what has been, if you don't know what your life looks like now, and if that's weighing you down, if you're heavy about it, dive toward Jesus. Don't push him away. Don't try to escape. Push for an encounter. Go and meet with him. You can't return to the way things were, but you can remember. An escape from reality won't help you, but a fresh encounter with the Spirit of the living God will make all the difference. So remember. Remember the beautiful times. Remember the terrible times. Remember what he has brought you through. Remember how he's never left you. Remember all that you've learned. And then take what you've learned, take what you've experienced, and dive towards Jesus. Leap to faith in Jesus. Because what I think you'll find is Jesus is so much kinder than we think. And he'll meet you there. He met Peter there. He's gone before you. And he'll be with you. Leap to faith. The table's set. There's a place for you there, just as there has always been. So come and dine with the King that says, "Surely I am with you, even until the end of the age." Let's pray.